So, if you ever watch any of my old live streams from way back in the day, this was pretty much what it was. It was mostly just nothing going according to plan, and that's pretty much it. So, this is great. This is great. This is some good memories. Um, I should preface by saying that the difference you're going to find with these live streams versus what I used to do before, those live streams were mostly just me kind of rambling on while allowing you to see a product for yourself in real time, because back in the day the way things used to work is wow, I have no control over this helicopter. You know what, this is going to be funny. I don't even think my joystick is plugged in. I kid you not. I do not think my joystick is plugged in. No, it is plugged in. I don't know what's happening. I never ever ever have a problem until the second I start streaming, and then everything just goes to hell. So this is crazy. Okay, maybe I have a little bit of control here, maybe not. We'll see in a minute. Um, the difference between these live streams and what I used to do before in the past is these live streams are really designed to give you an insight into my review process. So essentially, when I write reviews, the reviews are editorial, but all of my reviews will essentially include a live stream. And what that will do is it'll give you a direct insight into how I personally see products, how I judge them, what my insight is. But rather than me just doing that at my desk and looking at a product, essentially you get to come along for the ride and actually see what those thoughts are. Now, I will most likely come to a lot of conclusions during the live streams, but they will not necessarily reflect my final decisions. That stuff will generally come later on in the editorial part of the review, and that's when I'll determine what the scoring will be, what the rating will be, and of course, if applicable, what award may be applicable as well. So, in order to really get my full thoughts, you'll have to go back and actually pull up the review page over at FL350. So, now that I think I've gotten this train wreck back on the rails, at least for now, we are taking a look at the Godzone photo scenery subscription. I'm not sure if Godzone is still offering this as a subscription anymore, or if you can just buy the entire package. I'm not sure. Here's what I will say about it. Taking a look at the area that we're flying over now, as you can see, it just looks absolutely gorgeous. And it does work very well with FTX, NZ, North, and South Island packages. And to be honest with you, nothing gives you the true realism of New Zealand than these Godzone photo sceneries. I mean, they are absolutely amazing. But with that said, there are some caveats with that. Some are better than others, and I guess the way that I've more or less put it together is that the more recent photo sceneries, and I'm not sure if he's still doing it or not. There's still a lot of ground to cover in New Zealand, so I kind of hope he still is. But some are better than others. Now, if we take a look, just in the background here, I think that's Nelson. I'm going to try to zoom in on that back there. And even though it's far away, as you can see, it doesn't look all that great from here. There are some areas around Nelson. Where's Nelson? Nelson's on the other side of that peninsula. If you're at Nelson Airport, the photo scenery looks terrific. But then I think once you get on the other side of those hills back there, I think things start to fall apart a bit. And what I think is going on there is I think a lot of them are maybe the earlier sceneries. The earlier sceneries are not that great. And my hope for Robin Korn would be for him to go back and update a lot of those older photo scenery, because the quality is a bit rough. It is a bit rough. And so they don't all match up well. So I don't recommend all of the packages in the subscription, but I'm not sure if you can buy them independently or not. My windows are all fogged up here. I haven't flown this plane in a long time, but I think if I do that, should, I think. So I don't necessarily recommend all of them, but you'd have to go in and really, I guess, look at the pictures to see what's good and what isn't. So with that said, if you are a fan of Flightbeam's Wellington scenery, then I definitely recommend you get the version in the package that covers Wellington, because this photo scenery is just gorgeous. I mean, in fact, it's some of the best that's out there. You've got obviously your vegetation, you have autogen, you've got scenery objects such as these wind towers. So it really is good, but again, it can be kind of hit and miss depending on where you go. Queenstown, which is an Orbix scenery, Godzone has covered that area as well, and that area is done very well. However, Orbix did a large photoreal coverage area of that region as well, and there is some conflict. So I think there are some files or something. I have to go in and try to remember what files need to be deleted or removed or whatever to merge the two, because when I'm on approach to that airport, I see both coming and going, kind of conflicting with each other. So I would recommend the Godzone scenery over the Orbix scenery, even though they're both very good. But the Godzone scenery is obviously a lot bigger. So and I think if it's done right, the Orbix scenery will merge pretty seamlessly with that. I know I did it before in the past. I just completely forgot about it when doing another flight. So before getting to the airport itself, I just kind of wanted to give you an idea. If flying to New Zealand is new, if you bought this airport because you're like, Flightbeam is kick-ass and I'll buy anything Flightbeam makes, then you might want to consider getting the photoreal scenery package. Now, I'm not sure if the scenery on this side and this side is part of the same package. I imagine they are. I have to go back again and look at the manual. Of course, Robin Korn did a version of Wellington himself many years ago, and I remember that version of Wellington. In fact, I believe he includes that version for free with the photo scenery subscription, because I remember when activating Flightbeam Wellington for the first time, I did get some scenery conflicts. So if you don't have the scenery and you're thinking about getting it, just keep in mind there will be some conflicts. There are some files you're going to have to remove. I wish I could tell you what that is now at the top of my head, but unfortunately I just don't remember. So that's something that you might want to keep in mind as well. I'm going to start making my way over into the airport area now. So again, basically what you'll be seeing now is, and I've already actually seen the airport many times. In fact, I've done several flights into and out of the airport. So I've already pretty much put my thoughts together. A lot of these live streams, you'll be seeing my thoughts for the first time, because I'll be streaming it and seeing it for the first time the same as you. But in this case, I've already seen the airport scenery. I've made several flights between Wellington and New Plymouth. I've flown a couple of sorties to, like I mentioned before, Queenstown. And then I've done some trans-Tasman routes, Wellington, Sydney, Gold Coast, and Brisbane as well. So I've done a few flights in and out of here as well. So it's given me some time to try to get my thoughts together. And your thought process might be, well, if it's Flightbeam, then it must be perfect, because everything that Flightbeam does turns to gold, which I guess you could say is true. Flightbeam is certainly, Mir and his team of astronaut engineers have certainly made a name for themselves over the years, no doubt. But is it perfect? And that's a hard thing with Flightbeam and developers like FlyTampa or Jetstream, even LH Simulations, even though they've only really released the one version of Budapest, even though they are now currently working on updating that airport. There are some developers out there that have done one-offs where their very first project is like, or the very first large project is like the best of the best in the business, and then you just never really hear from them anymore, I think, which is kind of sad. It's kind of like Bay Tower Studios, the Vans RV7, if you remember that. What an amazing airplane. And even today, if that plane was released today in 2018 versus, I think, 2010 when it was originally released, I mean, it stands up to just about everything out there today than it did when it was new. So, I mean, that was a team that did an amazing job. Took them forever to get it out, and then once they released it, they kind of disappeared. It's kind of like those one-hit wonders, which is really disappointing to see such talent arrive and then disappears and, you know, never to be heard from again. So at least with the case of LH Simulations, because they had announced they were working on one of the Croatian airports, and I guess they gave up on that project. And I know that Misha had reached out to me from Orbix because they were considering doing that airport. And then I reached out to LH Simulations, of course, this was like 3 years ago. And they assured me it was still in development, and here we are 3 years later, and it's not there, and now they're working on Budapest again. So that's a little bit disappointing. Maybe Misha will go back and do that airport again. Just coming up now on the actual airport. So it's kind of weird in terms of, you'll have to go to the About page over at Flight Level 350 and really read up on how I make my decisions in terms of reviews and awards and stuff like that. But it'll give you a pretty decent idea of how I'm measuring all this. I like to think that the way that I approach my reviews is kind of similar to that scene in Seinfeld. I don't know if you ever watched the show Seinfeld, but there was this one episode where they're sitting in the diner. I think it's Seinfeld or Jerry and George and I think Kramer or Elaine or whatever. They're all sitting at a table in the diner. And George basically pulls out like $5 in singles and he puts it on the table. And they've just sat down, like they haven't even ordered yet. And then the waitress comes to the table, takes an order. And they're looking at George kind of funny, like, well, what are you doing? Why is the money on the table? And he's like, well, I am automatically going to assume that this waiter is going to earn the $5 tip. But every time he or she screws up, I take $1 off the table. And sure enough, the waiter comes or the waitress comes up and she doesn't greet him the way he felt he should have been greeted or whatever the case is. And right in front of her, he goes, whoop, and pulls $1 off the table. It's hilarious. So kind of similar to that in terms of approaching my reviews is I kind of approach it that, you know, all reviews are 5 stars and all reviews get a gold award until I start taking points away when I start seeing things that weren't done well or could have been done better or should have been done differently. All those little areas is where the points start to come back. So I try to approach every project that, you know, from a point of view that it's going to be amazing until I start to find areas where that might detract from that. So in the case of Flightbeam Wellington, I mean, it's easy to say that it's Flightbeam, so naturally it's got to be 5-star gold, right? So, and that's fine. I can start off in that area, but will it maintain that status by the time I'm done with the review? So since we are already looking at the coverage area surrounding the airport, I think this is actually where I would like to start. And I see this, honestly, as a missed opportunity. If I think back far enough, I want to say, God, man, it must have been like 10 years. But thinking back on FSDT, FS Stream Team. FS Stream Team released... oh no, we're going back further than that. We're going back to Cloud9. Cloud9 Amsterdam. That's how far back we're going. If I go back and remember Cloud9 Amsterdam, which, by the way, was an amazing scenery. I loved that scenery to death. I remember making my first trip to Amsterdam around 2005. Had a good time. Yes, I did. I won't tell any stories. Yeah. But I remember going back and visiting Amsterdam for the first time in 2005, and when I got home, the first thing I wanted was a copy of Amsterdam. Now, at that time, I already had like UK 2000, Heathrow Pro, or whatever it was, and so now I needed Amsterdam to connect with Heathrow Pro. I had already visited France the year prior, or Paris, I should say, so I already had the first version of the Simwings Charles de Gaulle. So now I needed Amsterdam, and I had known already that Cloud9 had developed it because I already had Cloud9 LAX, which of course, home airport, so naturally I had that. So I bought that Amsterdam, fell in love with it. The thing that I didn't know about it was that they actually modeled the main canal district of Amsterdam itself. And I didn't know that until after having the scenery for, like, I think a year, because when you're flying out of Amsterdam, you're not really looking at the ground. And when you approach, you really don't, even regardless of what runway you're approaching, you really don't see the city, I guess, all that well, or at least not in FS9, because I think back then the way things worked was, what's this, pause? Please don't crash. Please don't crash. Oh my God, please don't crash. Okay, good. I'm in prepared 4.5, and this thing does intermittent stutters, and it has something to do with autogen, and I'm not sure if the team is fully aware of it yet. So if you're in prepared 4.5 and you're finding that the sim pauses every now and then, it's an issue, and you're not the only one. A number of people have it, and that was just it. But anyway, I think FS9 had that scenery popping stuff, where you had to get close enough to it in order for the scenery to appear. And I think I was flying low and slow, or maybe I was busy crashing or something stupid, and then I noticed, oh, there's a city over here. And I remember when FSDT, we're fast forwarding, when FSDT released, what city is that? What's that city over there in western Switzerland? You got Zurich on the east, and then on the west you've got, oh, damn it, the one near the border. I don't know why I'm drawing a blank. Aerosoft is working on a new version of that airport. I don't know why. You know which one I'm talking about. And when they released it, there was a little bit of backlash, like, why didn't you do the scenery in the lake area? And what Umberto Cula Piccioni basically said was they found that people didn't really think it was necessary to do the cities surrounding airports. He remarked back on when they did it with Cloud9 Amsterdam, and essentially I guess they found that it just wasn't necessary. People just didn't find it interesting, or he found that it really wasn't worth his time. And when you're flying into Geneva, there it is. Boy, I'm telling you, my brain is like 5 minutes. Seriously, my brain is like 37 seconds behind my mouth. Jesus, which is, I guess, no different than any other day. When you're flying into an airport like Geneva, you see the entire city there. I mean, you're flying in right over the lake in many cases, and that is a city scenery that is so close to the airport that, I mean, why not do it? And I get that a lot of developers feel that it's not worth their time or effort or whatever, but they then go on to do Las Vegas, and it's even more so. And to me, I was never, ever fully happy with FSDT's Las Vegas scenery, because here you have major, major landmarks that are feet outside of the perimeter fence. And there's no effort whatsoever. And to me, that's like half the airport. The strip itself is literally half the airport. So how could you not do that? And basically the response is that, it either wasn't worth the time or the effort or whatever the case was, or too time consuming. So they just didn't do it. And that's really unfortunate, because you go and look at stuff like Dubai and Hong Kong and the new version of Las Vegas that FlyTampa is working on now, and it is absolutely mind-blowing. It really is. So there are certain cases where I think it is necessary for developers to include an area outside of the airport perimeter fence, and there are some cases where it isn't necessary. And I preface all of that simply by saying that I think Wellington's, the downtown financial district, or the central business district, is close enough to the airport, which is right over Mian, that I think it was a missed opportunity for Flightbeam to actually consider doing something like that. And if we go back and we look at all of the current Flightbeam airports, okay, Phoenix, that's one airport where I think they should have modeled the central business district, because of how close it is to the airport. You fly right by those buildings as you're approaching the airport. San Diego is not a FSDT scenery, but again, if you compare San Diego to Wellington here, the buildings, the downtown area is roughly the same distance from the airport. And who wants a San Diego airport scenery without those buildings, right? So in the case of Wellington, or let me just step back. So let me see. We had Phoenix, then we had Dulles. Okay, obviously Dulles is out in the middle of nowhere, so that's not necessary. San Francisco even is not really necessary. The cities is like, it's on the other side of the hills. You're not really breezing by the buildings on an approach, so that's one area that's really not necessary. Denver, obviously, again, another airport in the middle of the sticks, not a big deal. Portland was already kind of done by Orbix, but even if it wasn't, buildings are far enough away from the airport where it's not really necessary in terms of that. But Wellington, the downtown area is close enough to the airport where I honestly feel that not only should the downtown business district have been covered, but the entire peninsula that sits just to the, I don't know what direction that is, but to this side of the airport here, I think Flightbeam should have covered this entire area. And the reason why I say it's a missed opportunity is because the way that I see it, Flightbeam is, other than really Phoenix, Flightbeam doesn't really have an airport in its current portfolio that allows for such a thing as this. And to deliver Wellington Airport and deliver the downtown areas along with landmarks, I just think that would have been an excellent opportunity considering the fact that Wellington is a small airport. It's such a small scenery in comparison to everything that Flightbeam is really known for. And that's also the best thing about this scenery. I actually love the fact that Flightbeam has done a small airport. I used to say this about FSDT all the time back in the day, how I would love to see FSDT do a small regional sized airport. And the opportunity finally came when they did the Hawaiian airport scenery package. I actually haven't flown into any of those airports in about 4 years, so I'm not sure how well they hold up. But I do recall really significantly those airports being really good. And those are the smallest airports FSDT had ever done. And I thought, imagine if these, renowned developers that are so well known for doing mega airports, imagine if they do smaller airports. How awesome would that be? Because I always wanted an FSDT airport that was small and didn't drag my frames down into single digits. Of course, referring back to my old PC hardware. But, still being able to enjoy that level of quality from a developer that I admired so much. So the fact that Flightbeam has done such a small airport and such outstanding quality, I think it's great. And I want to see more small airports like this from Flightbeam. Imagine if Flightbeam did a lot of like inter-European international airports that are really small that have, maybe 20 gates or something like that. But in that outstanding Flightbeam quality, it's the same as Fly Tampa. Fly Tampa, and that's really the best developer to sort of compare because Fly Tampa, has done everything from huge ass city like Dubai, but then you have these tiny Grenadines airports, so it's a very diverse portfolio, and I really love that. And Wellington has certainly added, I think, significant diversity to the Flightbeam portfolio, just being the size of airport that it is. I also tip my hat off because Flightbeam has finally left the U.S. and has gone abroad. Didn't go to Europe. I think a lot of people thought Flightbeam would wind up in Europe far before winding up in New Zealand. But, I think they're really, this was an airport that really needed some love. The Robin Corn version from many a year ago gave it the love that I think it deserved for its time. But, it needed someone of a prominent airport development status to come in and really give it some love in the same way that Sydney did and Fly Tampa did that. Now, I do wonder how well that scenery airport has sold from Fly Tampa. That is my big question. Obviously we have all the Orbix airports in Australia, and as of the last few years, Orbix hasn't really put a whole lot of focus on Australia. The focus has really been the United States and Europe for the most part when it comes to airport sceneries. Now, will we see more airport sceneries from Orbix in the future? I can't say. Can I say that I know if there will be or not? I can't say. Somebody somewhere is telling me to shut the hell up, and they're probably watching this. But anyway, So I do wonder how well that Sydney scenery did. I'm very curious because it's been out for a few years now. That came out in 2015 or 16. Might have been 2015 that came out. So it's been a few years, and I wonder how well sales has done with that, because that will give an idea of how well sales may or may not do with Wellington. Not to mention the fact that, of course, Flightbeam is also working on Auckland, which, of course, is undergoing a lot of real-world development. So anyway, so just looking at this whole area that we have in view right now, this entire scenery area, I just think that even keeping in mind the God Zone photoreal subscription, which some people may have or may not have, as we've flown over that downtown central business district, it's not very well done at all. It's just, a lot of the buildings that probably came with FSX are kind of plopped on top of the photoreal. I'm not sure if any of those buildings are custom buildings or not. If they are, then Rob and I apologize. But the photoreal in the area is not very detailed, and the buildings are not very detailed. So this is a circumstance. This is an area where I think really could have been an opportunity for Flightbeam to really do a city scenery, if for no other reason than to see if it helps with popularity, to see the type of feedback they would get. Because I imagine Flightbeam including a city with an airport would be just killer kick-ass. It really would. And I don't think anyone who's probably watching this podcast watching this live stream days from now, since no one is watching live, would disagree with that. So that's why I say it's a missed opportunity. And given the fact that this is such a small-scale airport, this is not a mega airport, so even more so, I would like to see something like that done. Even San Diego is a larger airport than Wellington is, and that scenery is that you have that city done. Even though you can't really see the city from the airport, on approach and departure, it is quite prominent. But then it also adds the VFR element, because you have to keep in mind it's not everything. Not everything is IFR. There are those of us who love our helicopters, those of us who love our low and slow, and that also allows us to enjoy the scenery without necessarily having to fly into or out of the airport, even if we're just passing over. Here's a case in point. This is a perfect example. Half Moon Bay from Orbix, right? You have Half Moon Bay for Orbix, and you have Flightbeam San Francisco. Now, I was literally having this conversation with someone. I don't remember who I was talking to, but I was literally having this conversation about 2 or 3 days ago, where this particular person was trying to debate if they should get Half Moon Bay, and he basically said, I went on the Orbix product page. It looked okay. It looked all right. It doesn't look like much. I don't know if I'm going to get it or not. And so my next question was, well, do you have Flightbeam San Francisco? Oh, hell yeah, that's my favorite airport. I freaking love Flightbeam San Francisco. Are you kidding me? And I'm like, if you have Flightbeam San Francisco, go get Half Moon Bay. Why? Because if you're just using FTX Northern California, which some people do or don't use based on their system specs and performance, Half Moon Bay, the photoreal coverage scenery that Misha did is so huge that it pretty much goes all the way up to Flightbeam San Francisco. So here we go with that pause again. So what you wind up getting is a far better looking rendition of those mountains and hills surrounding SFO Airport, and it blends in perfectly with the Flightbeam scenery. And maybe one of these days I'll do a Half Moon Bay live stream where you can see how the photoreal goes right up to Flightbeam San Francisco, and it looks 1,000 times better with having Half Moon Bay than not. So even if you never fly into Half Moon Bay, buy it for the photo scenery for San Francisco Airport. Same thing with this situation where you like VFR, you may not want Wellington, but maybe you want the city done well because you like to fly helicopters and stuff. This is something where this scenery could appeal to more than one type of enthusiast or more than one type of pilot. So that's why I say that's a missed opportunity for Flightbeam, and considering the scale of the airport. And so I have to say that some points get subtracted from a 5-star gold, because I honestly think that should have been done, and it really was a missed opportunity. Now, obviously I can't assume, there are a lot of things that a developer might come back and say, well, listen, there's development time, there's resources, there's this and that. There's a number of reasons as to why it wasn't possible. But again, I still see it as a missed opportunity because, again, the city is so close. And mind you, how I judge my sceneries or my reviews, my expectations might go a bit above and beyond many others. Another reason why is because Flightbeam is just so good at everything that they do. You know, I, if nothing else, may have to work harder to try to find something wrong with the scenery. Because it can be really too easy to just say, it's like Oprah, you get a gold, and you get a gold, and you get a car. So that kind of, adds to that element. But again, I do see it as a missed opportunity, not including the entire city scenery. So with that said, I think we're going to land now. And we're going to start taking a look at the airport itself now that we got the coverage area. Look at the color of that water. That's just so pretty. You've got that nice photoreal in the background. And again, even if someone had the Godzone photoreal subscription, which they may or may not have had, I think the way that I still see it is, with something that could still work with or blend in with the Godzone and still get a much better look of the Flightbeam scenery. But considering the fact that it hasn't been done, that's why I still recommend that if you don't have the photo scenery for Wellington, based on this very live stream, you can see how well the two blend in together. So I don't think anyone should have a copy of Flightbeam's Wellington and not have the Godzone photoreal scenery. I think the two go hand in hand, and they are both must-haves. I'm trying to find out where I want to land here because I think I'm going to use Chase Plane to move around. So I'll probably land right here in the middle of this field because I want to make sure I have enough space to move far enough away from the aircraft. I know there's things like doors and stuff like that, but I haven't had the time to really figure all that out. So we'll just pop down right here. Nice and easy. And let's switch off that engine because otherwise we'll just hear that noise the entire time. And I gotta get me trusty Xbox controller. There we go. Now we can move around here. In fact, seriously? Oh wait, why aren't we? I just want to get rid of that noise. Okay, it's settling itself down. Let me just make a quick adjustment to Chase Plane so I can kind of fly around a little bit faster here. Is this the one? There we go. That's what I want. Well, I guess, oh, you know what? I need to get rid of Track IR too. So let's start. We'll take a look over here at the sort of general aviation and logistics side of the airport. Now, here is where I am happy. In fact, we'll go just beyond that here for a second and take a look at this area that's done just outside of the airport here, which is you have this little shopping center, which was also done by the old Godzone version as well. Obviously, nowhere near to this level of detail. So this is an area that scores points because you have a nice area just outside of the airport, which I imagine a lot of people probably shot before getting off of a flight. So I'm glad to see that all of this was done. And I think it would be necessary to do so considering the fact that this is where the control tower is. So this is all very nicely done. Got some decent photoreal here. Let me see, I need to make another Chase Plane adjustment. My movements are a little too sharp here. There we go. Try to smooth out that movement a little bit. That's a little better. So I do appreciate that this area was done nicely. And also, if we just move a little bit beyond here, you've got this beach here. Photoreal. I love the color of the water. I remember my trip to Australia, And I met with Misha while I was there when I was down in Sydney. And he took me over to this area called Manly Beach, which is like a short ferry ride from Sydney. And one of the things he kept pointing out was, look at the sky. The sky isn't the sky so beautiful? And I'm like, the sky? Screw the sky. Look at the water. The water in Australia is just so beautiful. It's the most beautiful water I have ever seen in my life. Now, I've never been to Tahiti or anything like that, but even, the time that I spent up at the Gold Coast and Elephant Rock and stuff like that, I just could not get over the color of the water. Like, you see water in videos and, pictures and stuff, all these nice vacation destinations, but you don't really have, I think, a real appreciation for how beautiful water is until you see it in real life. And the water all over the coast of Australia is it is so amazing. It is so beautiful. Chase plane is not letting me go over there. Can I come over here? I can come back over here. And I imagine it's probably not all that different with New Zealand looking at the water. So just kind of taking a look at the details of the reclaimed land for the runway. I think this runway was extended at some point, wasn't it? I believe it was. Is this reclaimed land? It looks like reclaimed land. Because it's Flightbeam, I could pick on them and say, hey, why didn't you do 3D rocks? No, that's overdoing it a bit. An interesting thing about my AI traffic, I used to use Ultimate Traffic Live, the new version from Flight 1. I do not like it. I am sorry, but their AI models are awful. Oh, you know what? I need to make an adjustment to my terrain here. Give me a second. I need a terrain adjustment. Give me 1 second. Graphics, gonna get a blank screen here. I need to push my mesh resolution up a bit, don't I? Alright, let's try that. Please don't crash. The only reason why I'm saying please don't crash, I have not gotten CTDs and P3D since version 3. Ever since I moved to version 4, I did not get any CTDs. However, there was an issue with VR. So if you use P3D in VR and you're getting a lot of crashes, which is what happened to me, there is a fix over on the Prepared website. So now all of a sudden when things pause, I start to freak out again like I did back in the day, because I'm like, this is a new version of Prepared. Is it going to crash? And it has crashed on me a few times. Since upgrading to 4.5, so, and getting those intermittent pauses, even flying online, and a bunch of us get this pause at the same time, and we're like, what the hell's going on? So that's a little bit scary. So the last thing I need is crashes in the middle of a live stream, which of course would be commensurate with just about every live stream I've ever done where I get a sim crash in the middle of things. But version 4 is pretty much brought an end for the most part to much of that. So I'm kind of hoping... Okay, good. It's back. Cool. We survived. There we go. So now we're seeing this the way we're meant to be. I needed to push my mesh settings all the way up. No traffic on this road, though. These tunnels that run under both ends of the airport. Anyway, for a second there, I was talking about my AI traffic. I moved over to the Just Flight traffic. I can't think of what it's called. This is the one by Just Flight. The ones from Flight 1 were just awful. The models did not look very good at all to me. But there is an issue with these ATRs where they just don't take off. They just sit there and they just wait forever. I'm pretty sure there's probably an update that I haven't downloaded yet. I haven't had the time to do. But the AI models are definitely a lot better than the ones from the Flight 1 package. So I think I'm going to stick with the Just Flight, even though it's still in alpha, I think, because they're still making models and making liveries and routes and stuff like that. But for the most part, I actually like this one better than the Flight 1 version. So I think I'll probably be sticking with this one. But very nice looking ATRs. Speaking of which, Coronado recently announced an ATR, and they will be releasing one pretty soon. You, of course, might want to buy it if it holds you over for the Milviz version. The Coronado version is one meant to fly around and enjoy, whereas the Milviz version is one that's meant to be more of a study level sim. So that's a whole nother topic for another day. Let's talk about parking lots here. So when we talk about taking a dollar off the table, and as much as I hate to do it, but the dollars come off the table with the parking lots, unfortunately. I am not pleased with the parking lots in this airport scenery at all. And I'll tell you why. If we get down here, and this is something actually that's kind of disappointing for Flightbeam Airport. I was actually a little bit disappointed in this area. You can see the tarmac here, which, by the way, is I want to say the F word, but I forgot to put the this channel is not suitable for young audiences. I have to put that on there before I start using my full-on, flat-out foul language. But these tarmac textures are freaking just beautiful. Like, I am cutting my eyes on the sharpness of just how well this is done. And of course, we expect this from Flightbeam. I mean, you can look at the quality grade of the. I'm not sure if this is asphalt. Is it asphalt or tarmac? I think it's tarmac, right? But you see, you got all the little pebbles and stuff that's mixed in, and I mean, it looks splendid. It's beautiful. But then we get over here and look at this seam. Now, this is something that I would expect from a lot of different developers, but I would not expect to see something like this from Flightbeam. This airs as a disappointment based on DeAndre's expectations. A number of other reviewers may not really care or see it as a big deal, and a number of pilots may not care either. But these are the expectations that come with when I do a review. So, first of all, this seam is a huge disappointment. What's even worse with regards to this disappointment is then we get out to which should still be tarmac for the roads and the streets, concrete, whatever, and we're not getting any of that. We are basically just looking at photoreal, which is just sitting on top of the ground textures, and that's basically what we're looking at. If I couple that again with the size of this airport being such a small airport, this is where the disappointment comes in. I mean, I have to try to think, like, what's another airport that's of equivalent size of this? Even if we look at Orbix Innsbruck as an example, that's an airport that's still smaller than this. But again, you go and you look at the parking lot areas, and everyone knows me and my BS parking lots, but it does make a difference. Now, back in the day, a lot of airports, you'd buy them and you'd sit on the side of an airport or a terminal such as this position here. You're sitting in your flight deck. You don't see the parking lots really, or it's just something that you see off in the distance and it's not that big a deal. You're busy focusing on your pre-flight, whatever the case is. That's not a big deal. But you go in this particular case, and you are taxiing right along this taxiway here. And it's kind of hard not to see it. And it's so abrupt. So that airs as a huge disappointment. Not only that we have this big seam here, but the textures, at the very least, could have moved all the way through the parking lot. Of course, that means not being able to use photoreal, and that means hand painting, and so on and so forth. I get that it adds to the time of development, but again, this is a Flightbeam airport. It is, in the grand scheme of things, a small Flightbeam airport. So even more so, and I've said this before in many live streams that I've done in the past, and I've beaten up on developers by building these really small airports with great detail, but then kind of getting lazy in other areas. And I'm not going to assert laziness. I'm just going to assert that for an airport of this size, I expect even more detail. So the smaller your airport is, the more detail I expect, open hangars, so on and so forth, internal modeling, because it is a smaller scale project, especially when it comes from developers that generally do large scale projects. So this is definitely a disappointment here. Although I love the look of this here. Now, one thing that I do know about Flightbeam is, and if we go back in time to the whole Frankfurt debacle, when the whole world rejoiced when Flightbeam announced that it was going to be developing Frankfurt, and then wound up reneging on that because they could not get access to the airport itself. So that leaves me to understand that Flightbeam does not do an airport unless they can get on site in order to get the most accurate renditions as possible. So I say that because I am curious as to whether Amir was able to get a local in New Zealand to come down and get these shots from the airport. A lot of these areas, obviously, you could shoot from the parking lot, which is good. But from the actual airfield standpoint, I wonder if if they got on-site photography. There's some roads here that run underneath the building, but they're just crashing into a wall. Now, should I beat up on Flightbeam for that? Is that really a big deal? I would say probably not. However, at the very least, what probably could have been done here was just some shadow technique and a black square. Just, it's like pride in one's work. This reminds me of one of the comics from Calvin and Hobbes from back in the day where the mother just finishes washing laundry, Calvin's laundry, and she's folding his underwear. Oh, no, she's not folding his underwear, but she's laying his underwear on his bed because she just finished the laundry. And he goes, well, Mom, aren't you going to iron it first? And she's like, no, what's your underwear? I'm not doing that anymore. And then he goes jamming the underwear into his drawer anyway, which he was going to do. But then he goes, she should take more pride in her work. So in this case, it's just a bit interesting to, wow, he goes right through that pole there. So considering the fact that you have animated traffic going in here, I don't know. I guess you've got this load-bearing column, which apparently is not in the right place. You have to keep in mind, when I do reviews, I really go all out. But you've got these load-bearing columns that apparently are blocking the road, and traffic is going right through them and into a wall. So most people might say that's not a big deal. I can't see that from the aircraft. Why are you making it a big deal? And that's just one of the things I do in a scenery. So in that case, maybe just a door, like Flightbeam has ways of making things look like something they're not. With Denver, for example, Denver in the areas in the windows, if you've never paid attention, that don't have internal modeling, if you look at it from the right angle, or pretty much from any angle, it looks like a 3D image. It's weird, but anyway, in this case, maybe something that looked like a 3D image could have been done there. So if we look at, for example, this ramp, which is done beautifully, again, look at the seam. This is the disappointing part. This is the part where I get a bit disappointed. But the entire parking lot should have been done with those textures. Again, taking in consideration. And so this is really my big disappointment with this airport. It's not that the city wasn't included, but this entire area is just such a disappointment because you can see where everything looks so beautifully and then it just kind of falls apart in this area. So, and also down in here as well, there's just no detail at all for the arrivals area down here. So, again, you could say big deal or not a big deal, but these are little things that I look at. And now the area above the car park is fine. Not the sharpest parking lot textures I've seen, but this looks good. So at the very least, the rest of the parking lot probably could have been done at the very least with that level of detail, which we don't get. Just moving back a little bit further away. As far as the airport entrance itself, I mean, all of this is, this looks fine. Again, this is an area that you obviously can't see from the flight deck of your aircraft, and it was done very well. So it's just kind of there's a bit of like an inconsistency that's kind of happening in the parking lot area. So that's pretty much where I'm gonna beat up on Mir, and that's probably where the beating up will end because again, I've looked at the scenery. I've had a lot of time to go over it, and there's a few areas though that I will point out that I'm surprised wasn't done. The only other thing here too is you get this seam in the golf course, and I'm assuming that the seam here is a seam between the God Zone photo real scenery and the airport itself. So I'm assuming this seam along the golf course, that's what that is, which shocks me that the entire golf course wouldn't just be done anyway. But if you don't have the photoreal scenery, I'm not really sure how this area fills in. Obviously, I'm sure it blends in with Orbix, NZ, and I would like to think. So that's probably not an issue there. So again, this gives you just a little bit of insight because the thoughts that I'm sharing with you are things that I would just be thinking in my head if I were doing this on my own and taking screenshots to write a review. So this is kind of that real-time thought process that you get to see. And of course, alongside that, you also get the opportunity to see, well, you know what, I disagree with DeAndre, and I think that this is actually fine, and this is more than good enough, which in many cases, yes. How I judge things will definitely be different than how you might do so. Now, what I will say that I really liked is this car park and the way this was done. Now, this could have just been done, you could have slapped photoreal on here and called it a day. But instead, it's actually transparent textures. This probably was not easy to do. So I have a lot of respect with how the car park was done. There's actual car models or 3D models here. We can actually punch in here a little bit. So, and there's lights in here as well. So this was very nicely done. No advertising on that billboard, and that's probably because when the airport was surveyed, there wasn't a billboard there at the time, so there's no billboard in the scenery. But this car park was really nicely done. This was definitely an area that could have just been slap a photoreal texture on it and be done. And instead, you do get kind of a full semi-transparent see-through sort of effect, which looks extremely nice. And again, when you look at these road textures here leading out of the car park and what they lead into, it's just like, why? What happened? What happened? I'm not sure if this hotel is new and still in development or if they're building something else next to it. Maybe they're adding on to it. Yeah, maybe they're adding something here. Definitely building something over here in this little parking lot. But yeah, you've got these nice billboards. Again, you've got these really lovely medians here and no roads between them. So it's almost like, kind of like, well, then what was the point of that? But again, you come up here and it just looks so fantastic. So there's some kind of inconsistency. Even the sidewalk, you know, just looks terrific. Loving these building textures here. Nice reflections on the glass. Obviously the quality we love. Now imagine if Flightbeam did the downtown Wellington district, the central business district there with these sort of textures. I mean, man, that would have been killer. Maybe a couple of heliports up there to play around with, but I mean, just really nicely done. So we'll start working our way around onto the airfield now. And I do wonder if Mir will come back with an update once whatever is going on here is complete. I'd like to think he would. This is an interesting little fence here for an airport, isn't it? It's just like an old country fence. Not something you expect to generally see with a large airport. But that's nice, though. I mean, if you're a photographer, you might even be able to get a lens in between there and do some close-up spotting. So one of the things that's easy about reviewing a Flightbeam airport is there's a lot of expectations that are simply going to be followed that you don't have to really touch on. For example, jet bridge models. I really don't have to have really much to say about jet bridge models in a Flightbeam product. They're all amazing and stunning and, you know, among the best out there. I don't really have to comment too much on that. It is interesting, though, that here he elected not to go with internal modeling as was done on other areas of the airport. So I wonder why that is. But if you're not going to do photoreal texturing, this is the way windows should be done. I think about Turbulent Designs. I'm going to be reviewing their latest release as well, that Idaho airport, which name escapes me at the moment. But one of the ways they do their windows is it's just like a gray texture. It's just gray. It looks like a wall with some reflection on it. It doesn't really feel like a window, and I'll cover that when I do that particular review. But in this case, I like the way the windows are done here. It has a nice tint to it. It kind of looks polarized. It looks like a window, and so whenever photoreal isn't, or not photoreal, but whenever internal modeling isn't going to be done, this is how I like to see airport windows done. I go back to my live stream that I did at Flight Tampa Sydney, and that was probably one of the first airports that I had seen where I was perfectly happy with the fact that no internal modeling was done because of how the windows were done so well. And so in the case here, I'm shocked that internal modeling wasn't done in this area just because it was done in other areas of the airport. So I don't know if that was a consistency thing or a time thing, but it looks perfectly fine. So it's not something that would detract points. You can see here we start to get into some kind of transparent layers here. Now, I'm not sure if this is a room or if this is just meant to serve as overhead natural lighting. I'm assuming it's a room, but there's nothing in there. And that's one of the other things I was going to point out. See, it's like the top is done, but the bottom is not. Kind of interesting. Same thing here, too, as well. These are skylights here. And no internal modeling was done there either, which I thought would have been a really awesome effect. As someone who admires airport sceneries, that's something I would love. Many of you are just flying in and out. You probably couldn't care less. But for me, that's something that I would have that would have seriously impressed me, would be to look down on that and actually be able to see on the inside. Some very interesting architecture here. I actually didn't do any reading up in terms of what the architectural focus is on this particular part of the terminal, but it definitely adds a lot of character to the airport. It's very nice. I remember seeing this. I think this was the first screenshot that Mirror showed us back at Flight Sim Expo 2018. And I remember as soon as I saw that, I was like, wow, that's going to be a badass scenery. And look at the glass textures. Oh my gosh, and the reflection. That is just so well done. That is so well done. And even if this wasn't see-through, just alone looks great. But the fact that you can see through just makes it all the better. I really love that. So what's the other somewhat disappointment? Well, I'm not going to say disappointment, and it's something that, oh, this is nice. I actually didn't see this before. Now, this is what I expect from Flightbeam. These little areas here that you don't go venturing into. This is what I'm talking about that pride in the work. There we go. We're seeing it over here. I didn't see it over there in that other area, but I'm seeing it here. Very nice. Of course, this is something that you'd be able to see from your flight deck, so naturally it makes sense to have it there, but that looks very nice. I like that. But the thing that I'm actually surprised with, I know that when Amir did the second version of San Francisco, one of the things that he had disclosed to me is that he was trying to develop this sort of people flow technology. And I know people flow is probably a trademark of Orbix, but I'm just going to use the terminology for sake of understanding. That he was considering or working on a people flow technology where he would have his own animated passengers and stuff walking around the airport. Another developer comes to mind is Joe Erland. He is probably the best at this. I love his airports. And by the way, I will be doing his Cologne Bond scenery in an upcoming stream very soon as these start to get more popular. I'm not really promoting myself a lot. I'm just letting the word of mouth spread naturally. But nevertheless, he's really good at this. And when you start boarding, the people line up in the jet bridge and that whole thing, and it's terrific. So I know that he wanted to do it with San Francisco, but it might be something that he's still developing, and that at some point they might all get released to all of the airports, assuming that he's still working on that technology. I'm not sure. It looks like there's a seam here. The window doesn't go all the way up to the edge of the wall here. Look at that. Yeah, there's a little seam there. So when it rains, a little water's going to get in there. Looks like, yeah. How about on this side? Is it the same on this side? Oh yeah, the windows don't go all the way up to the wall. Again, when I review products, I tend to go a bit above and beyond. Okay, so here's something that might be interesting to point out. Let me point this out now because this is also one of the things that I'm going to point out that's not wrong with the scenery, but things that could be done better or differently. Not done better, but done differently. And this is something that I want to challenge Amir to work on. So, and looking at the glass here, you notice that in all of Flightbeam's airports, we'll take Denver as an example, you cannot see through the terminal. And I'm gonna, let me just show you exactly what I'm talking about. If we come over here, you'll notice that you can't see through the terminal and out the other end. Now, there are some developers like Taxi to Gate that has mastered this. Obviously, Joe Erlin has mastered it. There are a few developers that have mastered it. I recall back, and there's a word for it, and I can't remember what the word is called, and I've covered this in live streams in the past from my old channel. You guys remember the first, well, for those of you who remember that far back, the very first version of Brussels from Dream Flight Studios. Do they still exist, by the way? Is it Dream Scenery Studio or Dream Flight Studio? Something like that. I got to see if they still exist. But they did that version of Brussels. This was like in 2006, I think they released that. It was a long time ago. But first of all, the scenery was amazing for its day. Terrific scenery. The thing that drove me crazy was you'd be sitting on your flight deck, and if it was a cloudy day because the terminal was completely see-through, it was transparent glass, you'd be sitting on your flight deck, and if it was a cloudy day and if the clouds were lower on the horizon than the glass, the clouds would basically like go through the terminal. It was weird. It was like the glass would disappear and you would see the terminal. And certain objects just couldn't separate themselves from the glass look. A developer will come in and correct me at some point of what it's called. But anyway, with Flightbeam, it's clearly a problem. With a lot of developers, it isn't a problem. But you see, notice if we come around this corner, now you see the glass is transparent. We can see it just fine. The glass on the other end, however, we cannot see through. But once we come here on this side, now we cannot see through the other side. Now, I wanted to show that because if we come back over here, okay, he didn't do that here. Here he actually completely went transparent, but we see the jet bridge. And now if we come through, and I'll just kind of move to the side, and now you see how that jet bridge is kind of floating. You see that, how it's kind of separating the glass? And this is what he is aiming to prevent. My controls are a little too fluid and I can't get my eye point where I want it. This is what he's aiming to prevent by having the windows opaque from the inside, and this is why you cannot see from the outside, because you see how that jet bridge just kind of separates the glass there and goes through. But there are developers that have figured out how to overcome that without having to make the insides of the window objects opaque. So this is one thing that could be done differently as opposed to maybe better. But this is something that I would probably challenge for the entire Flightbeam team to look at, because if it's one thing that adds to the immersion factor, and that's what all developers are trying to push, is pushing the immersion factor of their sceneries, is being able to see through a terminal and seeing the activity that happens on the other end. These are things that are not, may not be considered a big deal for many people, but I'm going to tell you why I think it's a big deal. I remember when Orbix first released the 29 Palms collaborative effort of Southampton Airport. And one of the things that impressed me so much about that airport when it was released was, and I wrote a review on it, it's somewhere out there on the internet, maybe not, I don't even know. But I was sitting on the flight deck, I was doing my pre-flight, and I was sitting right in front of that car park that's there, right in front of one of the gates. And I saw somebody walking by, just out of the corner of my eye, walking by and pulling their luggage, and it caught my eye just for a brief moment. And in that brief fleeting moment, it just, it felt so real. It felt so real, like the environment around me was alive. If we go back to FS9, The environment was not alive. Everything was static. Nothing really moved. Um, and in P3D, when Orbix first came out with People Flow, people thought they were a joke. Like, what is this crap? People walking around. What is this, The Sims? And now when it's not there, people are like, man, that's something that I miss. Imagine having an airport, an Orbix airport, a small airfield with no people flow. There are things that we've just gotten spoiled with where when it's not there anymore, we miss it. We may not think it's a big deal until it's not there, and it's like, wow, you know what? I miss not having this feature or that feature. So with certain airports where you do have that ability to see all the way through a terminal, you just imagine you're sitting there, you're on your flight deck, you're doing your pre-flight. There's people moving around in the terminal, and you see aircraft moving around back and forth in the taxiways on the other side of the terminal. It adds to the immersion factor, the realism of the environment that this airport is alive. It is a functioning entity. People are going about their business. Planes are coming and going, and you're being reminded of that, even if it's on the smallest level of all of this movement and activity going on in the background. And what makes that so realistic is because that is how it is done in real life. In cases where you have airports where you're able to see through them, you're on your flight deck, people are moving back and forth, aircraft are moving back and forth. You have these sort of minor distractions, but the world is moving. It is alive. It is a beast. It's active, and here you are focusing on whatever your task is, and the whole world is alive. So that's why I think it's important that Flightbeam works on that. Now you can see here on this side the windows weren't transparent or weren't opaque, but you see how that jet bridge, if I can zoom in on that, you see how it parts the glass over there. So this is something that I would encourage Flightbeam to work on in future projects. I know they're capable. I know they can do it. And again, because Flightbeam is so good at what they do, I have to find something. I gotta find something, because if you can never improve, you can never get any better. That's not a good thing, right? We can always improve in somewhere. My whole life, there's like a million areas I can improve. This is all looking just fantastic. I'm at the point now where it's not about trying to point out what's good. It's really more about trying to point out what's bad. Because what is done well is just done extremely well. I'm very pleased with everything that I'm seeing over here, and I love the eye-catching posters or advertisements inside here as well. And the only thing this is missing, obviously, is just people walking back and forth. This is the only thing that's missing. You got these departure boards here, which look really nice. In fact, there was another detail that I saw here which also blew me away in terms of pointing out how much I love Flightbeam's attention to detail. You have these TVs here. These are televisions, right? Now to see, well, these are just departure boards, so they're not just television, so we wouldn't really see anything else on that. But imagine the day where you'll pull up to a gate, like, for example, JFK. If you ever fly into or out of JFK, there's TVs everywhere, and they're always playing CNN or something. Imagine the day where you actually pull up to a gate and there's a television flashing imagery inside the terminal. That somebody will be the first to do that. I don't think anyone has done it yet, but somebody will be the first to do it. But anyway, pointing out this cute little detail here is if you go on the back of this little TV screen, it is actually the back of a TV screen. Like, he modeled the whole television. He didn't just say, all I need is a departure board, I'll do the front. He actually modeled the back of that TV. So again, these are just little stupid things that I do. I tend to go overboard when I'm looking at something. I'm like, I wonder if the back of those TVs are modeled too. Yes, I tend to go pretty far. Again, this is okay. So now I'm disappointed. So now we're detracting points again, because again, if you look at Flightbeam San Francisco, the areas where the vehicles enter and exit, there are openings. There are actual openings. If you look at Joe Erlin, I mean, he goes way above and beyond with SOTI, and the door will open, a truck will drive in, a door will close. Like, he blows me away. In this case, not necessary, but they're just driving into a wall. And again, there's a difference in consistency factor because with Flightbeam SFO, they are open in the same way that we saw on the other side of the airport here. You know, you have these little open areas for the vehicles to kind of drive in, enter, and exit from. So it's kind of shocking that there are a lot of areas in this airport where I'm finding some inconsistencies. These are static, right? All right, so here's the thing with these statics, which, by the way, are very nice, because I don't think Flightbeam has done commercial static aircraft yet. I think they're just like GA stuff, right? But these are very nicely done. Here's what I would want to see in the control panel, and I'm only bringing it up because I don't remember seeing this in the control panel. When our ATRs are delivered, we're obviously going to want to park in these spots. I would like to see an option where at least one is removed for vehicle parking. In other words, either, I guess if you remove both, because I'm pretty sure there is an option in the Asala to remove statics. I don't remember in the control panel. I have to go back and check that, but I'll add that into the editorial part of this review. Obviously, I can't park here with my ATR because both these gates are taken, but if there's an ability to remove one and leave the other and not place, I guess you need an AVCAD in order to use GSX, but you don't want to arrive at the airport and then there's an AI already sitting there. You want to be able to have this gate open. So I'm not really sure how that would work. That's a good question. But anyway, very nicely done on the static aircraft, and you see how nice it looks compared to the AI. So very happy with that. The vehicles, GSE equipment and everything looks very nice. Love that. But I like the static, and I don't want to get rid of it. You know, obviously, hard work went into these statics. So if there's a way to remove one and keep the other, so that at least one of these two gates are always open, that would be a good idea. It could be that option does exist. I just don't remember seeing that. So here we have the main sort of atrium area. And again, this is why we all love internal modeling. This is all very lovely, very nicely done. I'll kind of poke my head through here a little bit. See that detail. Very nicely done. No complaints here at all. Really loving all of this. From the external point of view, it all looks terrific. The only thing it's missing is people. Just a little motion. Some animation in there. That's all. That's literally all it's missing, but it looks terrific. These are boarding gates here as well. Wait a minute. What's happening here? I'm seeing something interesting. Let me move up here. What is this? I'm not sure. You see that? I'm not sure what that is I'm looking at there. Is that supposed to be glass? I think that's like a glass wall or something, I'm guessing. That's interesting. I'm not sure what that is. Okay. The only other thing is, how do people get out of here? It's on this side as well. There we go. So it's not exactly up against. Oh, I see. It is glass. At least on this side, it's glass. And that's the opaque side, I guess. That's interesting. But where's the door to get out? When all the people line up there, they're just going to be stuck in a room. This is interesting. On this side, it's a wall. But if you come around over here, you can see through it. I don't know if the opacity was put on the wrong side of the wall. Because if we see here, you can't see through on that side. You can see through on this side, but then you can see all the way through to the other end, showing that there's glass there. Is there glass on the other one? Yeah, on that side it's glass, I guess, but when you come around here, it's not glass, it's solid. So, okay, that's interesting. Okay, what else we got? Again, this is another area here where I would love to be able to see all the way through. This is a screening checkpoint, looks like. The modeling here looks lovely. You can see how that sort of wooden texture has been accomplished through the glass. So definitely love the way that looks. And you can see here the little tunnel kind of running underneath. Very nicely done. The modeling and texturing is superb. I mean, again, any review that I ever do of a Flightbeam product, I mean, that's pretty much always going to be kind of the going census. The modeling and texturing is always so well done. I like the boxes and stuff and cones, the clutter, air-filled clutter. Very nice. I'm just so happy to see Flightbeam having done a smaller airport. I do hope that this airport sells well. Minus my nitpicks, because that's just how I nitpick. When I go into a scenery, I get pretty deep in there. That's what she said. But yeah, I mean, very nicely done. And then we have this little part of the terminal here for boarding of the regional aircraft. Again, not able to see through, but nicely done. Nice internal modeling. So what I imagine is that if I have to check with Mira to see if he's still working on that, having the animated people, because that's going to be a big deal. Love the detail here. And this is why I think he got someone on the airfield to take pictures. It looks just a little too good. Loving that detail. That detail just looks fantastic. And I've been really enjoying this airport. Like I said, I've done a number of sorties, New Zealand flights and trans-Tasman flights, and I love it. And then we have the corridor coming back over here, which we kind of saw a little bit before. We kind of took a brief look here. And again, when it comes to the parking lots, I mean, you can see like where these cars are parked. You've got some ugly seams going on here. Again, we're seeing a little bit of that again. But if the parking lots were done on this texture with the drawn parking stripes, I mean that's really the only thing that's based on my opinion, what it needs. And as far as those vehicles that are driving through walls at the airport, this is all it needs. It's just an opening like this with some shadows and some shade, and then they go off and disappear in the darkness. There's that ATR still sitting there. Or maybe that's the second one after the first one just eventually disappeared. Before we go to night lighting, we're just going to take a look at this side of the airport because we really didn't get much of a look over here, all that much. But and this is the other points detractor, because again, we're looking at a small airport. So I would like at least one of two options. One being a SODI option, and a number of developers do this, where you can pull up SODI and open up a hangar door. Flightbeam didn't offer that. And just to make sure that I know what the hell I'm talking about, let me just bring up SODI real quick. But I don't think so. But again, because the airport is smaller, my expectations tend to go up. I tend to relax my expectations a little bit when it comes to mega airports, just because I get it. But out of curiosity, yeah, no triggerable objects. Okay. But that's something that, or just an one of the hangars that are open. Like this would have been a cool hangar door to be open or closed, because you wouldn't have that Air Force logos on the hangar. But maybe like this hangar over here, you got a little partially open hangar over here. There's no detail inside of it, obviously. The reason why I make a big deal about these hangars, and I beat up on Turbulent Designs back when they did Friday Harbor, because it's a GA airport. There are a million hangars on that land, and not a single one of them is open. And the reason why I think it's a big deal is because there are nuts like me that at the end of a long flight, you want to say, that's my hangar, and I'm going to go park my plane in my hangar. Or maybe I want to start my flight off in my hangar, as opposed to just parking in transient parking or something like that. It makes you feel a little bit more special when you have a hangar. I mean, who watching this live stream, if anyone ever watches it, would not want their own hangar? Like, listen, I don't have an airplane, but I still want a hangar, right? Who doesn't want a hangar? So flight simulation is the world where most of us get to kind of live a life that we don't get to have in real life. So naturally, having a hangar would be one of those things. I would love to have a hangar. And so in the case here, look at the texturing here is just so nice. Oh my God, this is all photoreal, isn't it? Somebody took pictures. This looks beautiful. But then look at the seam that you have here and the ground textures that it sits on. This is really my big disappointment with this airport. But the textures are just amazing. I love it. This building is probably my favorite building on the entire airport lot just because it's done so well. And I'm so happy to see photoreal. A lot of people are like, no, you don't need photoreal anymore. You get that photoreal, you get that texture baking. And I mean, nothing beats that level of realism. I mean, yeah, you can hand draw a lot of stuff, but when it comes to stuff like this, like older buildings like this, I mean, it just makes all the difference. That building just looks terrific. I love the look of this hangar. Man, if only those doors were opened and we could see the inside of it, I bet it would look amazing. And so that's a points detractor because it's such a small airport, it would be nice to see at the very least one of these hangar doors open. I'm assuming this is probably, yeah, it looks like that's from the AI package. Just give me one. Also, these airfield security cars are very nicely modeled, which is another thing that I'm going to be picking up on besides my parking lot is quality of cars. Now, Orbix they've just started using, I think, turbo squid vehicles. And those cars are terrific. I think everyone should use them. They are beautiful. So I'm not sure if this is a turbo squid or if the team or if Mir himself did that, but I love the look of that vehicle. That looks very nice. Like in contrast to the cars in the car park, which you don't really need the detail because you're not really seeing them all that well. But cars like that you see on the airfield versus cars in the parking lot, you want the cars you see on the airfield to be well detailed. I tend to not make a big deal about cars and parking lots. Like, for example, you see the difference in cars here because it's not that big a deal. You just want the parking lot itself to look nice and to have, decent looking car objects. They don't need to be perfect. If they're on the airfield, though, they should be. Yeah, this all looks like photoreal here. I'm only distracted by the terrain that they sit on, but otherwise, looks great. And I think these are also Flightbeam trees here as well, tree objects. Yeah, this is all like photoreal. This all looks terrific. The shading, texturing. Looks great. And then you have this big hangar guy over here and nothing inside. So I guess for Flightbeam, again, what I would like to see, number one, is definitely more smaller airports. Again, I don't know if Flightbeam will ever do an airport smaller than this, and I don't know if Flightbeam will ever do an airport of equal size of this. I think what will determine that is how well this airport sells. I think at the end of the day, that's really what's going to determine is how well this airport does from a financial perspective. And I think if it does well, then I think those things will be considered. But if they are considered, I think something that's important is feature set. When you get mega airports, you get a mega airport like JFK, which is like 6 airports in one. I mean, they're huge. And so naturally, you're not going to get all these little itsy bitsy features because, number one, you can only put so much in a scenery like that. But when the sceneries are smaller, I see them as opportunity for developers to do things that they haven't done before, to kind of get a little bit more creative in these smaller sceneries. And that is something that I think will is what makes smaller sceneries better than the large sceneries, is that is the ability to open up the creative direction a little bit more and add a little bit more that you otherwise would not do in a mega airport. And so that's why those are the areas that I would say that Wellington kind of falls off a bit. Again, I can tell you now, the airport is a Gold Award airport. It is. It's just not a 5-star Gold Award. And what it takes to get 5 stars, meaning that, everything has to be perfect. And whereas it's not perfect for 5-star gold based on how I preview sceneries, it's definitely a gold product because, it ticks so many of the boxes so well that you can't not. It's such an outstanding airport. And again, the better someone is at something, even more so when it comes to the scrutiny. Like for example, if this was a first-time airport from a first-time developer that never done an airport before, like number one, this would be a holy shit moment. But I may not be as inclined to pick on them so much. Only then to point out, okay, this is what I would encourage in the future. But when you're among the best of the best, even more so, I have to get creative and, okay, what can this developer do in the future? What can they do differently? I think stuff like that is important. And I, for the most part, I think many developers have come to rely on me for stuff like that, which is why a lot of what we see feature-wise in airports today are much of which are the result of a lot of my feedback. So, but all in all, I love this airport. I absolutely do. And honestly, there has been no airport in all of New Zealand that has kept me flying down here. I love Milford Sound. I'd probably say Milford Sound is my favorite place to fly into down here. But, as far as doing commercial flights, number one, you have to have places to fly into and out of. And I want to thank Orbix for delivering more airports lately. And in fact, I will be doing a New Zealand stream. You might recall a long time ago I did a Norway stream. I will be doing a New Zealand stream where I'll be going in and taking a look at all of the airports that New Zealand currently has to offer, freeware and payware. But this Wellington scenery. This is a scenery that really has me wanting to fly in New Zealand now. And when it was released, I was like, in fact, I never once did a trans-Tasman flight before this airport. Or did I? No, I did once. I did do a flight from Launceston to Milford Sound in a small jet. I did like a few years ago, and I was so bored with that flight. But now I have a proper airport to fly into. I didn't do Queenstown. Queenstown, it's good, but it's not great. It's good, but it's not great. There are a number of areas like the ground textures and tarmac and stuff that I think could use an update. But it is a really good airport, and I certainly recommend it. Just taking a look at this, I'm actually noticing this from the first time, is that these doors are actually transparent. There's a car in there. So that's nice. You could have opened one of the doors, but the fact that you can kind of see that also looks really cool. I like that. This is one of the nicest fire stations I think I've ever seen. And the fire truck object too looks really nice. I'm assuming this is the exact model truck that's in New Zealand. Yeah, that's very nice. I really like that. Let's take a look at the night lighting now, shall we? Let's see. Let's go to preview here. I'll preview a time first, and then I'll have to set it. Just to make sure all the features do work. I think I'll start right about there. Screen will go black for a second while I load. But yeah, I've been having a lot of time flying into and out of Wellington, and I want to fly larger aircraft. And Queenstown tends to be a little bit too close a flight. It's what I think it's like 45 minutes, and that's actually a decent style flight. But it's also given me an excuse to actually explore more of the Orbix airports in Australia. So the flights that I'm planning on coming up. I want to do a flight to Cannes. I haven't done that one yet. Let me see, where else haven't I not flown? Adelaide. Wait, did Orbix do Adelaide, or is it just a city? I can't remember. Somebody did an Adelaide a long time ago. I can't remember. You have Melbourne, um, which is there as well. So that's another one. Um, and who knows? Latin VFR actually released Santiago, so that might be an interesting flight. I don't think there is a real world flight between Wellington and Santiago, maybe Auckland, but that might be an interesting flight. Of course, if you're a flat world theorist, then that technically is an impossible flight. You cannot fly from like New Zealand or Australia to Santiago, Chile, if you believe in the flat world map. Which, if there is ever a flight simulation enthusiast that's a flat earther, could you imagine like a pilot, like an actual pilot, being a flat earther? Does anyone notice that? Like all pilots are in on the lie. I guess that's what that is. Okay, taking a look at the night textures now. I know prepared version 5 has all that like beautiful PBR lighting. I don't know if we'll see it anywhere. You might point it out if you see it. Also, I should mind you that my performance is going to dip a bit here. It's probably going to get a bit stuttery because I'm streaming on an older 1080 GPU, and it's time to upgrade. So I'm doing that while on a large 4K screen and streaming at the same time. So that's going to take a performance impact. It's time to upgrade my GPU in order to do this. So this is probably going to hurt your eyes a little bit. So I'm going to try to just kind of mosey through this kind of as fast as I can, because it is obviously going to take a performance hit and it's going to look awful until I can get that GPU upgrade that I need to be able to do this properly. This was also one of the reasons why, because after handing over Air Daily X, my plan was always to continue doing the live streaming, but around all that same time, Prepared version 4 came out, which takes a much bigger hit on GPU resources. Then I went from a 30-inch 1080 screen, or not 1080 screen, but it was like a 2K screen, 2560 by 1600, I think it was, to full 4K screen. And this screen is this is actually a very high-end screen that I use because I do photography, so I do a lot of editing, and I need that. I need that higher quality screen for that. So anyway, it works out great for Flight Simulator, but the downside of that is it takes quite a punch during trying to do live streaming with it. So right now, everything in there is taking quite a beating on the GPU because the live streaming is what holds it down. Let me see, what's my current performance. The performance here, by the way, I should note, is very good. So I just pulled up my performance counter. So my performance counter is jumping between 29 and 59. Oh, I saw 69 there. So the frame rates are fine. It's not the frame rates. It's really the lighting and how the lighting kind of causes these stutters a bit. So it's going to hit me a little bit. But as far as the night lighting goes, night lighting looks terrific. I've said it before in the past, Flightbeam has some of the best night lighting, comparing a lot of different developers. So obviously night lighting, there's really no disappointment here. Everything looks absolutely terrific. I'm just getting those stutters a bit. Oh, it's a bit rough. I could turn down settings in order to make things smoother, but one thing that I wouldn't want to do is not show the scenery in its best possible light. No pun intended. So if you want to know what settings I'm using, again, you can go to fl350.net and pull up the About page, and all of my system specs are there and what my actual P3D V4 settings are, so that you know. And you can see they're actually very high. And I don't want to change those for the sake of a live stream and show off a product that's not as good as it should be. I remember someone did that. Actually, I think this AFCAT needs to be adjusted. I don't think a 737 parks there. This is actually my old employer here. I miss it, but this is the company that I used to work for, that big high-end job that I had that I spoke about that caused me to leave Air Daily X. This was the company that I went to work for right here. And I still keep in touch with a lot of friends that still work there. A lot of big changes are happening there, though. A lot of big changes happening there. Anyway, I remember this. This was Avsim. This was what airport was it? Was it? I don't remember if it was Denver. I'm pretty sure it was Flightbeam. I just can't remember. I can't remember the details, but someone on Avsim, some kid, must have been like 6 years old or something. And if the kid is six, then obviously it's pretty sad, but it still reflects more on Flightbeam, or not Flightbeam. It reflects more on Avsim. Ooh, I like to look at this truck. I don't think I saw this truck earlier. Very nice. But I mean, it was probably an adult. But this person did a Flightbeam review, and it might have been Denver. I don't remember what it was, and how it came across my radar was Amir himself. He updated his Facebook page talking about this review and how awful this review was. Or maybe I found the review and told him about it. I don't remember, but this review was awful. I mean, and I kind of feel bad for the kid who wrote the review because his system specs were really low. And so when you looked at the airport and the pictures, it looked like it was FS98. Like, I mean, everything was pixelated. I mean, it was bad. It was really, really awful. And I don't really blame the person who wrote the review so much as I blame Avsim for publishing it, because when you review a product, and I mean, granted, you always want to keep an eye out for the little guy who doesn't have all the high end systems. You got a lot of people there that are poor and love flight simulation, and flight simulation is a very expensive hobby. It is, and everyone tries to find a way to make do. You have people who have full 737 simulators in their bedroom, and you have people who, can barely afford a laptop and are doing their best just to enjoy what they can. And that's all fair. Granted, it really is. But when it comes to doing a review, and if you want to keep the little guy in mind and you want to say, hey, if you have lower settings, you can do pictures and show what a scenery might look like with low settings, depending for those who might not have a great system. Like, all of that is, totally fair enough, and I think we all get it. But it's impossible. It is important to show these products in their best light, the way is intended by the developer. And in this case, it was just it was really, really awful. And Avsim, they wound up pulling the review. A lot of people started commenting, and it was the feedback was really awful, and so Avsim eventually pulled the review. But I know I wrote an article about it, and basically just saying, reviews are something. When you do a review is not just from the aspect of, oh, I like this airport. I mean, the purpose of doing a review, and those who write them, especially like Mootly's Hangar, which is a website that I really like. When you do a review, I mean, it's not just about what you like. I mean, there are a number of things that go into it, but what's most important is to show off what the developer is trying to convey. Trying to show a project from their vision, right? What the experience that they're trying to deliver. And for the most part, we thank God for Prepared version 4 for allowing us a 64-bit, which allows the developers to push themselves even further. But they are still going out of their way to optimize their products as much as possible so that everyone can enjoy them at the highest settings possible, absolutely. But it's important to show these products in their best light. So to that end, I didn't want to reduce any of my settings just for the case of improving the performance for the purposes of the live stream. I really wanted to just show it how it is. So if we have to suffer some stutters, then yes, but I just want to make sure that I add the disclaimer that the reason you're seeing the stutters is not because of the performance of the airport, but rather because of the fact that it's my hardware that's kind of struggling showing it while streaming. Now, if I wasn't streaming, and again, mind you, my frame rates are through the roof. I mean, I'm getting between, back here, I'm getting between 59 and 60 frames per second. So that's fine. The stutters is just because, you know, the night lighting on my GPU while trying to stream this and running it on a 4K monitor. It's pulling resources pretty hard on my GPU, and it's time to, if I had a TI, I think I'd be fine. But with a normal 1080 and streaming, it's putting a little bit of pressure on it. So I just had to leave that little disclaimer in there. So my overall final thoughts of the scenery will go into the editorial. This live stream will be archived on my YouTube page here, and will be available within a few hours. Because obviously not many people are watching live yet. So this will be able to be seen later. And then, of course, all my final thoughts and scorings and screenshots and everything along with the live stream will all be on the review page for Flightbeam Wellington. So I still have quite a bit more work to do before it's published. But overall, and like I said, every now and then I'll be able to say in advance, you know, what sort of rating does the airport get. And what I can say is this is definitely a gold airport. I mean, number one, you know, we look at what are some of the things that are important. Number one, we look at location. And to me, this is an amazing location to put an airport. I love Wellington. I think this is just amazing. You know, it's Flightbeam, so textures are obviously amazing. You know, there are a few detractors, so I put $5 on the table, and I think I took a couple off, and I think I pointed out those areas very well in terms of what could have been done better or done differently. So I definitely offered my opinion in those areas, but I'll get into a little bit more detail with once I do the actual written editorial. But for the most part, I'm very happy with this airport, and I love it. I mean, I absolutely love it. I there's not really much more I can say about it. You know, this particular project is a mirror project, and I think they're starting to point that out now because as the Flightbeam team grows, we might start seeing developers from that we know under different brand names start releasing their own airports. So it's important to point that out. So, for example, PDX, which by the way, that one is coming up as well. I'm holding off on that stream, and I spoke to Bill Womack because there are a number of things that he's still working on to enhance the airport. So one of the things being is he's working on the new Atlantic aviation model. So we're waiting for that. He also noted that he is working on internal modeling for the terminals. So I don't want to jump the gun on that live stream because once I do it once, I'm not likely to do it again. So I just want to wait until he's done with all of that. But you got Bill Womack. You've got Thomas Lowe Jethro, who is known from Jetstream, who his most recent release was, oh shoot, what was his most recent release? Whatever it was, I know I loved it. I just can't think of what it was. Damn it. Oh, Orly, right? Yeah, I think it was Orly. And that's coming up as well. Orly was amazing. Milano Linate. I did a live stream on that. If you go back to the old YouTube page, you'll see the live stream of that. I was completely blown away by that. So he did Palermo as well. Love that. So he's joining the Flightbeam team. So I'm not sure if he's joining Flightbeam just to be a team member or if he'll be releasing products under his name in the way that Bill Womack has done. So that's yet to be seen. So that'll be interesting to know as well. I'll be looking forward to seeing if that's going to be the case. So because one thing that I want to make sure I do is know who's who in the development realm and make sure that I point them out. I like to put spotlights on who does what in terms of their efforts. So another developer, David, and this is, I think I'll save this story for another time. Should I tell the story? I'll save it for another time. But anyway, you have David, who's known for Dreamflight scenery, and he works with Flightbeam as well. But he is really more of a team player as opposed to you know, this scenery is by. But I think his first one, where I think he'll be trading on his name under Flightbeam, which is the one that was Ecuador or something like that, somewhere in Central America. I'm pretty sure that airport's going to fall under his name. So, but in this particular case, this is a mirror scenery, and you know, it's terrific. I mean, it is Look at that. You can't look at that and just say that that is just not beautiful. I am so happy with this airport. I love it. And again, every negative element, and I just want to make sure I, you know, include in my postscript here before I end the live stream at about 2 hours here that we're coming up on, is everything that I pointed out is a nitpick. Oh, wait, is there a fire truck in there? Oh, I didn't see that. There's a fire truck in this one. But the fire truck is facing the wrong way. Wait, is there a door on the other side of this? That fire truck is facing the wrong way. Mirror. That's it. This airport gets a bronze because, oh, there's two fire trucks in there. Oh, okay. Oh, I see. Okay, this one's facing the right way. I think he just did this one just for some variety. I gotcha. I gotcha. You can even see the lights are on in there too, which is cool. Little things like this, little attention to detail like this is what drives me crazy. I just love it. I really do. I just love it. So anyway, in my postscript, I just want to add that everything that may seem like a negative or a detractor that I've pointed out in this scenery has all been a nitpick. Has all been a nitpick, and that's because that's all I can really do with it with a developer that is as good as Flightbeam, is try to find something to nitpick, right? A lot of people could not possibly give a shit about parking lots, right? And I've taken heat over that over the years, and people still make fun of me, which is good. Every now and then on Facebook, for people who know me personally on Facebook, will just send me random pictures of parking lots. You know, it's great. It's something that I've become known for, and I love it. I love it. And I know I've said this a million times before, but if you've never watched one of my old streams, the reason why I point out things like parking lots is because if we go back to the days of FS9 and the early days of FSX, essentially what many developers did was they focused only on the air side, and on the land side there would be nothing. So literally you'd be on the air side of an airport, right? And you would see, like, you know, it's all not even internal modeling or anything, but you see what obviously looks like a square for a window, right? But if you went on the other side of the airport, there wasn't, for some developers, there wasn't even textures. It was just like the stuff straight out of Gmax. It was just gray, and there was nothing there, and the parking lot would be completely covered with trees and stuff just to hide it, because the thought process back then was people don't care about this because you can't see it from the flight deck, so therefore it doesn't matter. And so I used to beat up on these. I used to hate it, and I used to beat up on these developers and say, you know, if you're releasing a scenery, an airport, release the whole airport. Take pride in the work that you do and release it whether people see it or not. And I think over the years, I think people have kind of caught on that, and not only caught on, but I think this is what separated some developers from others, where you know who really has the passion for what they're doing, and you know who's just doing it for a job. And so that separates, and that's why I like to point out developers individually, because it really says a lot. You really see who does this work because it's what they love, and it's because it's what they truly want to deliver, versus those who are just trying to shove an airport out and make a quick buck and then go on to the next airport. So, and clearly Flightbeam is one of those development houses that really focuses on that very highly keen attention to detail, and it was done here. So the only way to really do a thorough review without me sounding like I'm just a fanboy, which I am. Oh, hell yeah, I am. I am a huge Flightbeam fanboy. So if that makes me biased right now, go ahead, baby. So the only other thing I can really do is just again, like I said, is point out, is nitpick, and everything about this airport that isn't perfect is a nitpick. So for, I would say, 98% of you, this airport is a 5-star gold. Absolutely, hands down, beautiful. And for me, it is definitely a gold. But because I nitpick, it is not. So I have to be very strict when it comes to how I do my reviews. And so this gives you an idea of what goes into my thought processes. And obviously I have a lot more thinking to do and a lot more work to do in putting out the editorial aspect, which will be out in a few days. But this should give you just a little bit of insight while also allowing you to see the airport for yourself and put your own thoughts together as to whether or not you'll buy it. And I'm going to leave you on this as I hit 2 hours here. If you are not interested in this airport simply because of the fact that you don't fly around in New Zealand, you fly the same airports, or you've never been to New Zealand. I've never been to New Zealand. And I bought this airport, by the way. I guess that's stuff we're supposed to say now, whether or not you receive a product or if you buy it. I actually purchased it. I wanted this airport so bad that I bought it. I wanted it right away. I didn't even ask for it, although I'm sure Mir would have given it to me. And I'm happy that I bought it. I'm very happy with my purchase as an enthusiast. I love it. I'm very happy with it. But again, so I lost my train of thought already, but. Yeah. So the bottom line here is it's a terrific airport. Oh, I remember now. Um, if you've never considered flying in New Zealand, maybe consider going somewhere new, exploring the world, doing something different, because the Flight Sim world has a lot to offer, and there are a lot of experiences out there that I think is worth the trip. It really is, and I think coming down here is worth the trip. If you're one of those kind of people who never slews to an airport or just selects an airport and flies there, do a flight. Grab like an A320 or 737, and go L.A., Honolulu, any number of Pacific Island simulation airports that they got out there, or you have like Orbix, Pago Pago, and then come down here and see it for yourself. And while you're down here, see what else New Zealand has to offer. I'll be doing that in an upcoming live stream. And if it's one thing I want to encourage people is to get out of your comfort zone, stop flying the same boring sorties you always do, and discover something new. And that's what Mir, I believe, wanted to do in coming down to New Zealand as opposed to anywhere in Europe or anywhere else. For his next passion project was to come to New Zealand and deliver this airport. He's done an amazing job of it, and I think you owe it to yourself to get the scenery if you don't. So anyway, stay tuned to flightlevel350.net. Where I will be putting up the official review, hopefully in a few days, and of course this will be on YouTube. So the first live stream, we're getting there. It was a little bit of a train wreck on the start, but I think I'm gonna start finding my groove again and getting back into my mojo. I think I can do it. So anyway, it's good to be back. Thank you all for joining me, and I will see you on the next live stream. Take care, everybody.